everybody. This is Dr. Lori Shemek.
And I'm Omar Cumberbatch. You're listening to This Podcast Burns Fat. Hey, Lori, how are you today?
Hi, Omar. I'm doing wonderful. I am up to my knees in puppy debris.
Puppy,
Lots of toys and shredded papers and you name it.
Oh, man.
It's all over the place. My house looks like a war zone.
Oh, man. So you're in the middle of training this dog.
Yeah, in the beginning, the very beginning.
Oh, man.
Yeah, in fact, she's here right now and she's biting on my hands. I'm trying to give her something.
Yeah, that's a tough phase. I had an incident when we first had our puppy, and he ate, and I should say, and this is going back many years, and actually I think it was a teenager, and he ate like my best friend's leather jacket while we were just playing video games. Yeah, and then we had just moved, and my mother had to pay for this.
Oh my
leather jacket. We just moved. He was going to kill me and the dog.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous.
It's risky having a puppy around, I tell you.
Oh yeah, no, it's
something always gets ruined.
Exactly. But speaking of training, I wanted to do a shameless plug because my podcast course is out, and everyone who listens to my other podcast, Health Coach Academy, is aware of it. But I'm saying, I figure this audience is so big and they know what we do. And if they're ever interested in getting a podcast off the ground, this is definitely something that I would love for them to take a peek at, because, you know how our show is so successful, and we basically just mirror the blueprint of how we got this show to where it is today. So if anybody's interested, they can go to omarcumberbatch.com and look on their courses. And it's right there to take a peek at and see if you like it. If you know anybody else who likes it, please share. So I wanted to throw that in there.
Wonderful. Congratulations. I love that.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. And of course, you're a huge part of that. You are featured in there. You have a video. You have 2 videos with me in the course. So I thank you for sharing your knowledge about our experience. And I know that.
Always.
Yeah, no.
Well, I love working with you. So whatever it takes.
Likewise. So today we have another podcaster, right? Evan Transue, and
excellent one, yes.
Oh yeah, no, and he's doing big things for FDNs, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition people over there with Reed Davis, and his podcast is called the Health Detective Podcast, and he just came on our show and really dropped a whole lot of gems. So he was an awesome guest.
He was. I mean, he truly has a gift, and he'll give you his story, but it truly has changed thousands of lives. And we were really, blessed to have him on our show, and he dropped a lot of nuggets. So to help so many people optimize not just their overall health, but their mental well-being as well.
Yeah, no, his story is tremendous, and I'm glad that he's out there just pushing his message out. Everybody knows that there is a link between what we consume, not only in our diets, but just our world. It really affects mental health, and he's really drops a lot of, like you said, nuggets about that. So yeah, let's jump into it.
Okay.
Hey, Evan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yay. Thanks for dropping by. We're happy to have you. I know our audience is.
Yeah. And I said, oh my gosh, it's a nice change up. I haven't gotten to do an audio podcast in a while. We were all joking beforehand that you guys don't understand this. If you're listening, it's extra stress being on video. You're constantly worried about, like, am I sitting in the right position, or does my head look crazy? And then it still does, but you're just worried the whole time. So audio is nice.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, Evan, since we obviously on video a lot, does the video actually add 20 pounds to a person, or yes or no?
No, I'm very thankful. I've always had the opposite problem, if anything. So I think I would be welcoming 20 pounds extra. I know that might sound a little crazy to some people, but trust me, to be positive. I got to adjust myself to make it look like I have some damn muscle mass on me.
Oh man, I've heard that many times. So like I said, Lori, don't do too many videos. So yeah, that's what we hear. Anyway, let's jump into your origin story, Evan. You have an awesome story. It's really just amazing how you got to this point. Yeah. So I definitely wanted to give you a chance to share that with the audience, and then we'll just dive into some questions after that.
Sure. Thank you very much. And of course, anyone can spend a multi-podcast on their story alone. So I'll give the summary today. basically, I'm like most people. I didn't start out in life saying this is the space that I wanted to be in. I mean, the official title now, right, is functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. I don't think there's any 5-year-olds out there saying that that's what they want to be when they grow up. But this space, when we deal with health issues, it can kind of find us. And it's very cool when you're on the other end of it, but it can be hell of a lot when you're in the midst of it. So for me, I grew up in a fairly normal family. We didn't have like a ton of money or anything. We certainly weren't poor. I was nice, steady middle class, never really had to worry about much. Got the stuff that, I asked for Christmas, generally speaking, which was great. And one of the biggest benefits is I had 2 parents that loved each other, only people they've ever been with, married for 30 something years now. So everything was pretty stable growing up is my point. And yet, despite that stability and things going well at school, at 5 years old, I started to deal with my first health symptoms, namely migraines, stomach issues, and panic attacks. Now, these things weren't coming up every single day at the time. It was a very slow trickle process. And so it starts out with that. And at first, it was kind of like, do we even do anything about this? Because it was happening so infrequently. But then my parents caught on to this. It was happening a little bit more. And they don't know anything about health, or didn't at the time, but again, they're good parents. So they said, this doesn't seem like something Ev should be dealing with. Maybe we take him to a doctor. And the issue is, and it was something that I still remember, believe it or not, to this day, I'll never forget this. He said this wasn't something to worry about. Ev's going to outgrow this and he's going to be fine. Mostly talking about the mental health stuff, to be clear. Now, this was not a bad doctor who was trying to screw me over, but I think just how the stigma of mental health specifically has affected all of us at one point or another. And we've seen it kind of get actually better, for better or for worse, because of the pandemic. It kind of got better with the mental health stigma. You go back 22 years ago, I'm 27 now. That's kind of crazy difference in how we treated mental health and addressed it. And so I think it affected even our healthcare professionals. I don't think he expected a 5-year-old with 2 parents, and that's why I mentioned that part, to be coming in dealing with severe panic attacks when there was no history of abuse, no history of trauma. There was nothing like that. Over time, these things started stacking on. And so by the time I got to 18, I know I'm fast forwarding quite a bit, but it wasn't random health symptoms every now and then. It was 7 different diagnosed conditions at the age of 18. Daily symptoms, both mental and physical, by the way. Wow. Daily symptoms. And unfortunately, my coping mechanism for the mental health stuff specifically, and just the other things that I was going through. I mean, I had severe cystic acne. I was a mental mess, but I was also very self-conscious. I hated my life, to be honest. And I started using drugs. And that was my coping mechanism. It wasn't a good one, but it was the best solution I had at the time, because I kind of solidified this idea over the years that if I was supposed to outgrow these things and I never did, I must be the problem. And so I actually became more reserved in talking about what was going on the worse that I got, figuring that it's an Evan Transue problem and not something that could be treated or addressed. I got kicked out of school in a school that has a 99% graduation rate for high school. It's not the place that you do that at, and got kicked out of there. I'm not a hardened criminal, I promise, but I did spend a few days in juvie even. I spent my 18th birthday on house arrest. It was a life-altering event to get in trouble for the things that I was doing. And thankfully, that was also a blessing in disguise, because several months later, I got involved with a really interesting and very positive group of young adults who were all goal-oriented. They read books. I mean, who does that, right? They're reading books. They're setting out plans for their life. And what's nuts is, because this is 9 years later, most of them have hit exactly what they said that they were going to do, which is crazy. But at the time, I just thought it was great to get around these positive people. Now,
it shows, just to interrupt, that your environment is huge. It's a powerful player. So that was really smart.
It saved my life. It's everything. And so why I mention these people is not just because they're happy, positive people, but I found them, and I'm not in those companies now. Some people love them, some people don't. I'm not here to talk about it one way or the other, but they were in a network marketing company, basically. And so they all sold products together. They all did these things. They genuinely were these positive people, but they were very much into sales. Now, I didn't care about any of that crap. I wanted to be around good people. So I get in there, and it turns out the product that they were selling was this high-potency multivitamin. Now, we're selling all the time. So I'm drinking this thing like 3-4 times a day during the events, whatever. And I noticed after a couple of months, my mental health was probably the best it had been in years. And of course, the obvious answer is here, well, you're around better people. That makes sense. So that's actually how I wrote it off at first as well. But then the company shut down, as many network marketing companies unfortunately do if they don't market the right way. And I still have the friends. They're some of my best friends to this day. But the mental health symptoms came back. And I had this thought for the first time where I know I didn't use this complicated of terminology, but something along the lines of, I asked, can nutraceuticals lead to health, or lack thereof rather, lead to health symptoms? And so I start just Googling these things. I didn't know what PubMed was or studies. I didn't fully understand that stuff, but I was starting to read studies and teaching myself about them, showing that, yes, this absolutely had an impact on mental health. So I'm thinking, why didn't no one tell me this? So this started out as a mental health journey mostly, but as I got these things better, I noticed that the gut issues went away. My cystic acne was clearing up. The chronic sinusitis was going away. The GERD was better. Like, all of these symptoms got profoundly better. And I found my passion in holistic health, which eventually led to FDN and the FDN system, functional diagnostic nutrition. And because of their system and what I did there with the labs, I can now say at 27 years old, I no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for any of the 7 conditions that I had. Again, some of which I was told directly by a healthcare professional were incurable. Now they'll just tell me I'm in remission, but I'm like, wow, it's a damn long remission. I'm enjoying it.
That's their word of choice.
Right. And so that's kind of the story that got me to here now. Wow. And now, again, this chose me, but I love it, and it's my passion.
Evan, that's an incredible story, very powerful. And, and I was wondering if you could just kind of enlighten our audience members that don't know about the connection between mental health and gut health, because there's a direct correlation there.
Absolutely. So I laugh because, I wish it was more common knowledge, and it can be in our space, but then we remember that we live in a bubble and most people have no idea about this.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so listen, for those listening that might be getting introduced to it for the first time, it is new and we have a lot to learn. Here's what we know right now. Let's just talk about some quote unquote basics. If you don't have the proper amounts of protein, then you are not going to be able to create neurotransmitters. That is a fact, right? A lot of the amino acids that get broken down from protein lead to the production of neurotransmitters. So just a basic one is, if your gut is compromised, whether it's from the digestive perspective or you have leaky gut or something going on, anything that leads to you not breaking down that protein as well, you're probably not eating enough to begin with, because we're all in Western society. Yeah, right, where we don't do that. And so you're not getting enough to begin with. You're not breaking it down properly. By definition, you don't have the right tools to create a proper mental health environment. And then, of course, we can get into the stuff with the gut microbiome. And we do know, and this, again, might be a brand new concept for some people, but believe it or not, they've actually done studies showing that certain strains of bacteria can either have positive or negative impacts on our mental health. So it's a loaded topic, but that's a huge thing, not to mention a significant portion of our serotonin is actually created in the gut. And that's, of course, what people are getting put on medications for, the SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. We're trying to prevent the reuptake so we can get more of it bioavailable. In theory, that's what's supposed to happen, but who knows if that's actually what happens.
Yeah.
And so why don't we just get some for free by getting it from our food and a healthy gut? So direct correlation, if someone does not have trauma in their life, and I know most of us have had some stuff, but if you have mental health symptoms like me that didn't really make sense, that's always when I'm looking at the gut first.
So, Evan, I'm glad that you brought this up about just the gut and the issues that so many Americans have with it. What are the telltale signs of actually a gut that has been compromised?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because it's not always GI issues. So I don't want to be confusing for people, but a lot of the times, you could have no GI issues and have this stuff going on. So let's talk about some of the symptom manifestations. And these are just common symptoms. That doesn't mean it's going to be identical for everyone, but what you'll find, and it's a particularly fascinating observation when you do take this holistic perspective, because I had just mentioned that for someone that maybe doesn't have trauma, but has mental health issues, they should look at the gut. Well, what I can nearly guarantee about those people, because I speak to kids as well, and a lot of kids will come up and ask, hey, I kind of related to your story. I don't feel like I had a bad life. What's going on? I can guess that they have some type of skin issues normally. It might not be the worst case in the world, but eczema, psoriasis, maybe something with acne like myself. They usually they do have I'm trying to describe it right. It's issues with mood that aren't necessarily mental health diagnoses. So they'll find themselves going up and down a lot, right? One second they feel like, hey, I got my energy and I can do the schoolwork. And the next moment it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so dang fatigued. I don't know what else I can do. They might have allergies. Usually with the kids, it's a little less common, but adults especially would be autoimmune diagnoses, right? There's so many out there and you got a label of one. That could be another warning sign too. So it's interesting that you see a lot of these external manifestations of stuff that could be going on with the gut. Obviously, if you have chronic pain in your gut, pretty damn good indicator that something's going wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd be shocked by how many people have no GI symptoms sometimes, and yet their gut's a mess when you look at the lab tests.
That is fascinating, really, because I've heard that a lot, where if you don't even have symptoms, then, you could be still having issues with leaky gut, etc. So, yeah. So how did you finally just take the leap and say, I'm done. This is it for me? Was it joining the network community?
Yeah, it was a little after that. That was a huge catalyst. I don't want to sound like my story's inconsistent, but really what did it was quite a dramatic moment. I already had the mental health stuff, as you know, and that was a huge motivator. But I got a diagnosis at 18 around the exact same time that I met these people of something called Meniere's disease. And Meniere's disease is an inner ear disorder characterized by extreme bouts of vertigo. So I was getting just vertigo for no reason, that I thought no reason.
And so young.
Right. It's very rare in general, let alone at that age. And so I went into the ENT, ears, nose, throat specialist, and I got the diagnosis. He's like, yeah, you have the hearing loss in one ear. I can measure this. And I'm like, wow, like, holy crap. So he meant well. Again, another good person trying to do the best that they can. But he said, all right, you're going to need this medication. It could help, possibly a surgery one day. Here's a sheet. There's some dietary stuff that you can do. It's actually been shown that like salt intake could be correlated with this. And we'll check in with you in a month or so. Okay. And I'm like, holy, like what? Like, this is it? And I went online, Lori, and I remember the first thing that I saw was suicide support forums for people who were dealing with the condition. Oh. And when I saw that, I said, okay, I have been miserable my entire life, pretty much, increasingly so. I finally make a little bit of progress getting into this group over the last couple months. And then I get hit with something like this that's so bad that the first thing that I see is forums online trying to get these people more or less to not take their own lives. And I don't want to be dramatic. This is really what it came down to. I said, okay, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to keep getting sicker and sicker my entire life. This isn't a life. This is struggling. This sucks. I don't want to be here. However, if I'm going to do something like that, like if I'm actually contemplating taking my own life and not being here anymore, I better try every damn thing I possibly can before I do that. And it was actually that, in addition to the stuff that I was just starting to feel with the mental health benefits from the multivitamin, that led me to saying, all right, that's a big decision, man. Have you tried everything? It's like, no, you haven't tried everything. You went to a few doctors over the years. You weren't even talking to them because you were so nervous to go back in because you thought it was a you problem. You just learned what an actual mental health diagnosis is like 6 freaking months ago when you got arrested, because they had a psychologist work with me and he's like, yeah, you're not dangerous. You have mental health issues, man. You have generalized anxiety disorder. You have major depressive disorder. I'm like, I didn't know what that was. I had no idea what that even meant. And so that was a very powerful moment, very negative in a certain sense, but it ended up being positive because I'm like, if I'm going to take my own life, I better try all this stuff. And lo and behold, I mean, I found stuff faster than I ever thought I could. And just getting something to move the needle in the right direction, that's all I needed. I didn't need perfection. I needed hope, right? Something I see all the time in the mental health space is you don't get people taking their lives because they're in 10 out of 10 pain, although that does come up. I don't want to be ignorant. That does happen. But half the time, it's a 6 out of 10 pain that they believe is never going to get better and that there's never going to be a solution to. So human beings are pretty damn tough with pain when we see the light at the end of the tunnel. When we don't see the light, we start to ask, why am I even here? And so once I had those first things working that gave me hope, I was locked in and honestly happier than ever before, despite still having a lot of the symptoms that I started out with.
So, Evan, I think the one question that I'm dying to find out, especially given like the benefits of the supplements that you were taking at the time, what was let me ask you this. Did you identify any food or lifestyle choices that was affecting you so negatively, and what were they?
Yeah, I don't want to. I hope this doesn't sound generic because I feel like it's a common thing that people talk about in the health space now, but this is just my story. It's my truth for this. I don't know if it was the only root cause. I don't really, at FDN, we really don't believe in root causes. It's not to say that there isn't one, but it's to say that by the time someone comes to us as sick as they are, you might never be able to identify the actual first root cause, but you have a bunch of them that you can work on. If I had to guess, though, my mom and I, because we discovered this in my mom too, have a relatively severe immunological reaction to gluten that is not celiac and it's not an allergy, but it does show up on sensitivity tests. When I removed that and gave it some time, that is one of the best, best things I've ever done. And then the second best thing, although I'd put these up there, I don't know which one I would choose over the other per se, was the sleep. I thought 8 hours was 8 hours. I thought if I went, this is kid logic. I thought if I went to bed at 3 a.m. and woke up at 11 a.m., that's 8 hours. All 8 hours is not created equal, folks. We are diurnal, not nocturnal, even though we seem like we have the choice to do that. And so you are getting more bang for your buck, basically. That can be a way to look at it. If you're sleeping 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 instead of that 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. So, Omar, the sleep and removing gluten and never, ever going back to that, probably the best things I ever did for my health.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad we just had a sleep expert on the show recently. So this is very much a nice refresher to kind of reinforce that the importance of sleep is really a game changer.
Yeah. If I may add this for the mental health side too, it's like one thing I say to kids, and listen, they don't want to hear about health stuff, right? So I have to build the rapport first, but then I kind of give them these interesting facts, just something that they can think about. And it's something the audience can think about if they have kids. People under the age of 18, this is proven. This is not my opinion. People under the age of 18 that go to bed past 12 a.m., which is pretty much every kid over under 18, they are 42% more likely to be diagnosed with depression than those that go to bed before 12. And the problem is the leading cause of suicide is untreated depression. And that's the second leading cause of death in people ages 10 to 34 in America. 10 to 34, second leading cause of death is suicide. Wow. Number one cause of that's untreated depression. If I told the audience that something that they were doing right now would give them a 42% increased risk in cancer, 99% of people would stop that tomorrow. And yet we somehow think that this is a joke. And I don't mean that in a funny sense, but we don't take it as seriously until it happens. We keep saying we're ending the stigma, but yet people are doing this all the time. If I told you 42% increased risk in cancer, if you stay up past 12 a.m., 99% of people would stop tomorrow. And yet we have people doing this with depression all the time. And it's one of the biggest risk factors for a shortened life expectancy for our youth. It's crazy to me.
And then you just throw in a bad diet and no exercise, and there you go.
Right. It's whole myriad
mild dehydration.
Yeah.
I could go on. But so would you suggest that people get food sensitivity testing or gut testing in general? Since we all know the gut is the epicenter, is what I like to refer to it as, of health, of every aspect of health and mental well-being.
I mean, I'm biased because obviously it's what we teach at FDN, but I'm not biased in that it's what helped me. Objectively speaking, it's the only thing that ever really helped me is giving me this data that showed me the changes that I needed to make. And you talk about hope. The irony of some of these labs, they come back and they look awful for some of the clients, but you've never heard them so happy yet on the call, except when they got the labs back, because they're validated. They're validated in the way that they've been feeling for all these years and, not getting diagnoses properly or not getting supported properly. You have these labs that come back that look, like I said, terrible, but they're actually super happy because now they know that they have some action steps. So I highly recommend it. We don't want to be removing things randomly. That's how we can get into unnecessary restriction. But when we look at certain tests, say a food sensitivity test, for example, and we can see no, objectively, you're having an immune response to this. Like that's not helping your body right now. And you might not even have to remove it permanently, but some of them are probably best to do that with. But others, you can probably reincorporate this eventually. But right now, this isn't serving you. And so you need to figure out what's your goal. And then are you going to remove things that don't serve that goal? So yes, they can be very beneficial. I highly recommend the MRT. It's called the Mediator Release Test by Oxford Biomedical Labs. Again, this is kind of a podcast in and of itself, but not all food sensitivity tests are created equal. I'm not affiliated with these guys in any way, but the way that they test is way different than any other test. And in fact, they have a patent on the technology. So that's how much different it is.
So Evan, keeping it in the realm of testing.
Sure.
As far as people come to you who are interested in losing weight or just really just stabilizing their weight at this point because they're just having such issues with it, what kind of testing do you recommend and you find most effective in actually getting to see some results?
Sure. Well, we kind of use a system at FDN. So we do something that can be remembered as an acronym. We test for hidden stressors. So hidden stands for hormonal, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system. So those are the 5 core tests. Because the 5 tests include all those 6 words that we're testing for. And interestingly, to go back to the food sensitivity test, one of the craziest weight loss stories I have in my own practice was from someone who only ran that. Generally speaking, I like when someone does all the labs, but this was a case where the person was so new. And she gives me permission to share this. It's not like I'm not making fun of her or something, but she was so new that she was coming from, hey, I still eat McDonald's 2-3 times a week, but I want to work with you. So it was a hell of a jump for her because most people that come to someone like myself or other FDN practitioners, they're not new to this. Like they have been trying and they need more tools, and that's why they come to us. So you'll have people that work with you here that, they've been eating organic for 10 years. They've been doing gluten-free for 5 years and they still feel terrible. And that's why they want all the labs and stuff. But for her, I figured, okay, sometimes less is more. Do I really need all these labs? I know they're going to look terrible. So why don't we just start with some basic stuff? And if you can make those changes effectively, then we can move up into the more heavy hitters. So I run this food sensitivity test with her, not thinking anything crazy is going to happen. She lost, and mind you, this is without any restriction of calories intentionally whatsoever. I say intentionally because maybe it naturally led to this. I did not ask how much she was eating in a day. I did not say you can only eat this much. That's not my job. I'm not trained in that. I don't care what you eat in terms of the calories. I said, I want you to remove these foods that came back up on this test. That woman lost 34 pounds in a single month from removing the foods that she was sensitive to. And the thyroid medication she had just started her numbers got so much better that the doctor said in 1 month, you don't even have to take this medication anymore.
Wow. That's
impressive. Listen, your results may vary. We like to use multiple tests for a reason, but that's a home run in our world. Her body was inflamed as crap. It was pissed off. That's really what was going on. And when she changed those foods around, again, no caloric restriction that was intentional. Again, I'm sure naturally not eating McDonald's and switching to Whole Foods did that. But you guys are a show about this. You know how many calories in theory someone would have to burn in a month to lose 34 pounds.
But it's more about the type of food that does damage.
Right.
Yeah.
She wasn't burning that off, and she wasn't on an exercise program. So it's crazy.
Yeah, that's a really impressive story. Did she have any gut issues?
When we tested later, yes. Yes, there was some stuff going on. But her main thing was she was basically in an autoimmune pattern. She was just about to get diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, autoimmune condition of the thyroid. And that's associated with hypothyroidism. So I always tell people you can think like hippo means slow, even though hippos are dangerously fast. If you actually look them up, don't mess with them. But that's how it's a good, funny way to remember it. So everything in the body's slowing down. And so these people actually can eat very little and still be gaining weight because the things just aren't working properly. So this is where it's fascinating. The reason, in my opinion, from knowing what I know about her, the reason the weight loss happened is because when we identified the food she was reacting to, one of which was gluten, by the way, when we removed those, I think we slowed down the autoimmune process, which allowed the body to work properly again. So it's not that the 34 pounds, this isn't magic. It's not that it just disappeared. It was never supposed to be on her anyway. And so as her body got healthy, the weight dropped. I think too often in this country and other countries around the world, I'm in the United States, what happens is we think that you lose the weight and then you get healthy. In our philosophy, we'll help you get healthy, and by definition, you'll lose the weight if we do this right.
Yeah, that's ultimately our philosophy about this show. That's why we
Nice.
definitely introduce, people like yourself who expand on that point. I'm curious too, like what's your take? And I hate to keep bringing our friend back into this, but what was like her inflammation? Because I want to impress to the audience, of course, that the inflammation part of this is a big deal, and when you reduce the inflammation, your weight actually goes down as well.
Yeah, well, and it's totally fine. Kate is one of my biggest advocates still to this day, and she shared this publicly. I mean, literally public on Facebook, tagged me and stuff, wanted everyone and their brother to know that this existed, but she had no idea prior. So no worries there. In terms of the inflammation, I guess, I mean, to be direct, there was nothing ran that would be like a direct inflammatory marker. We actually didn't do traditional blood work with her. It was only the food sensitivity stuff. But
Gotcha.
when you think about the food sensitivities, when that immune response happens, I mean, yeah, you're literally causing an inflammatory cascade. That's what is happening with the immune response. And it's always the body trying to do the right thing. It's trying to protect you, but that's what people don't get. You can almost the way the food sensitivities end up being a huge issue, especially gluten. This part in particular seems to be unique to gluten, and it's a very fascinating thing. When someone takes a vaccine, for example, let's say it's the measles vaccine, when you get exposed to that small amount of measles, basically what's happening is you're giving your body a chance to build that immune response. And the issue is, and why some people feel crappy immediately after that they get it, is because your body's trying to fight something, right? So there is all this inflammation, there's all this stuff going on that otherwise, who knows, might be very useful, right? I'm sure you don't want measles. Obviously, I'm on a health podcast. There's controversy about those things regardless. I think it's mostly the added ingredients that would be the issue, if anything. But yeah, not getting measles sounds like a pretty good idea. The issue is with certain food sensitivities, again, particularly gluten, it's really interesting looking at this literature. The body seems to develop a response to gluten similar to the one that gets activated for these diseases that we use in vaccines. And so what that means is there is an incredibly delayed immune response that happens from even a single exposure. We know for a fact right now that celiac patients and non-celiac gluten sensitivity patients who have these antibody responses developed might have elevated immune responses for 3 to 6 months after being exposed to gluten one time, even if that, I don't know how else to say it, the dose of gluten, if you will, was only the 10th of a size of your thumbnail.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
3 to 6 months. Now, listen, the good news is a lot of it, it's kind of, it's almost like diminishing returns. So the significant drops in the first month or two, right? We just know that it's slightly elevated for the rest of the time. So you'll feel better in the first month. But then you look at someone like Kate, who removed gluten and these other things and lost 34 pounds in a month. It's like, well, what the hell's the next 5 going to look like?
I'm sure dairy was on her list too, right?
Dairy was on her list. Yes, it was.
It's an offender.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, what's the next 5 months of your life going to look like if this is what the first month did? Holy cow. And so that's why, to answer your question about the inflammation, it's like, I know it was there. I mean, you could watch her before and after pictures. I mean, the puffiness in her face just died down. But how I can measure it objectively, other than the food sensitivities, I technically, I don't have anything for that.
So what would you say to somebody who is, let's say they don't feel great, they have maybe gut issues and weight gain? What would you say the first thing they should do would be right now?
If you want to talk about some free stuff, let's just take the labs even out of it.
Yeah, that would be
Cool.
great.
Well,
but whatever you think is important.
Oh, okay, cool. So then in a perfect world, I mean, yes, you would come do the labs with FTN. The system's amazing. And I mean, weight issues are kind of the least of our worries there. That's just, we're working with such sick people that the weight thing is just, that's a byproduct. So that's fine.
Right.
Now, I don't want everyone to have to spend the money on labs. Let's try some stuff first and see if your lifestyle is not just the culprit, because we have two sides at FDN. We have hidden stressors. I already talked about that. But then we have our trademark dress protocol. It's diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. And the reason supplementation comes in is because you could argue that certain supplements are kind of a necessity in today's world with what we're missing. So if you do the dress part side, the lifestyle part right, you might not even need some of the other things. So one of the things that I don't think most of the people in this audience might have ever heard before, unless you've brought on a guest in the past like this, is our light environment. Now, they've all heard stuff about food. They've all heard stuff about calorie counting. So do what you got to do. But I want to add something new to the conversation. And so I ended up, as I dove deeper into this area of study of functional medicine, it became an obsession, a very positive obsession of, all right, let's see all the different things that this can do. And I want to find out why human beings are so ill in today's world. And everyone and their brother knows that the food's not good. Some are still eating it. But you talk to anyone on the street, they are going to be able to identify that our food's not good, even if they don't know why. Now, most people don't think about light, though. And so there's some fascinating studies showing what artificial light does to our health. And Dr. Lori, you and I were almost joking before we got on air that, thank God for the audio version, because I could turn the damn artificial light off in the background. Well, one of the things that happens when we're exposed to artificial light, and this is going to sound crazy, especially for someone that might be dealing with like diabetes or something. When you are exposed to artificial light, it creates a cortisol response that raises your blood sugar. And so we talk about carbs all the time, for example. That's a very mainstream thing. And I'm not saying that carbs work perfectly for everyone. I've done plenty of ketogenic stuff, for example. But no one ever talks about this. How many people are listening that are in artificial light right now? They might be in the office, they might be in the kitchen, and you probably close your damn windows on the way to work.
Or in front of their computer.
Of course, right? In front of the computer. When you're exposed to that artificial light, I'm not trying to create paranoia. There's solutions to this. So paranoia is not going to help anyone, but we want to be aware of problems so that we can solve them. When you're exposed to that artificial light, your blood sugar is higher than it's supposed to be. Even if it's by an only marginal amount, you have a chronic stress response going on that is leading to elevated blood sugar. But you won't hear about that. Yeah, you're not going to hear about that in the doctor's office. So again, there's some solutions to that, but that's one thing. Then the other side is, and this is a well-known one, but I'm going to connect the light thing into it. We know that when people don't sleep well, their blood sugar is dysregulated. And obviously that leads to cravings, which could lead to the weight issues. Well, one of the things that happens is, again, under this same lesson of exposure to artificial light, when you're exposed to that before bed, I mean, in fact, it takes about 3 hours for melatonin to be properly secreted. So if you're exposed to artificial light anywhere within 3 hours before bed, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage. Again, I'm not saying live in paranoia, but just acknowledge that that is a disadvantage if you're on a weight loss journey. There's also studies showing that people who catch morning light, sunrise specifically, are actually those who have a lower BMI than those who don't. Again, they're not one size fits all things, right? These are tools in the toolbox, but I've been very fascinated by the light side of things. So I can even send over some stuff to you guys afterwards if you'd like some resources that can be put in the show notes, things that people can do. But the basics of it is get out of artificial light as much as you can and get out into natural light as much as possible, especially in the morning, to set that circadian rhythm, let the body know what's going on. But in the middle of the day right now that I'm on audio with Dr. Lori and Omar, like this is what my life looks like. It is still sunny here. It's 6 p.m. EST, but it's summertime. So it's like 2.5 hours before sunset. I have no artificial lights on in this room except for my computer, which has a filter on it for the blue light. And my only other sources of light are 2 giant windows, which I'm in an apartment right now with my girlfriend. I was very specific to get a place that had giant windows and natural light. And it sounds simple, but the difference that I feel working in this versus when, we're still a company, right? We got to do business stuff. Just 2 weeks ago, we all had a lot of the leadership team in the company meet in Las Vegas, and we had a hotel conference room, and there's no windows in the conference room whatsoever. 8 hours a day, locked under artificial light. I work inside all day long. But when I did it there, when I don't have the natural light and I'm getting blasted by the computer and all that stuff, I'm looking around at all our teammates because we all get this and it's a health company, so we can talk about this. I'm like, guys, I need a break if that's I feel like crap. And I'm only 3 hours in and I feel like crap. And normally I can work all day. So there is more benefits than just the weight side for the light stuff. But you get that right, it'll change your life. It'll change your happiness, your work-life balance, because you'll be able to feel like you can do a lot more. And then eventually you'll start to wonder, well, damn, don't we do the same thing with kids, locking them in all day? And the answer is obviously yes. So a big thing for weight loss, but just health and well-being in general.
Wow, that was a powerful way to close the show. So I have to kind of piggyback and just give you one more little segment around this topic before we wrap. I really appreciate it. You killed it today. So thank you for all the great information. Can you describe like how a typical, I was going to say American because obviously we're in America now, but like it's obviously something that's dealt with all over the world. How do they get to bed considering all that? Like, I mean, I'm thinking of people even if they're doing the right thing and it's 10 o'clock bedtime at the latest, you got to start this process around 7, right? I mean, it's kind of difficult. So I was to see what little tip that you can give to help us at least correct that.
Yeah, it is one tip in general, but the first thing I'd start with, because it's a great question, and these are daunting things when you think about it. It can be damn overwhelming. That's why I reemphasize over and over again, don't let it be paranoia. And I apologize because my motivational speaker for youth is going to come out for a second, but if you want to worry about the how of any of this stuff, yes, there's practical tips, but it needs to start with the why it's being done. And if the person's not sick enough yet, and I mean, they might literally be sick or they might just be sick and tired. If they're not there yet, none of this stuff's going to work. You are going to stop because most people are not doing these things yet. We're getting there. It's slow and steady, but we're not there yet. So you're going to be different. You're not going to be doing what your friends are doing. You're not going to be doing what your family's doing. You have to be the leader. And that might not be something that has been wired into you. I don't think it was wired into me, but I had to become that person. So it starts with the why.
It's challenging too.
Yes. And I think I have, again, I don't mean ever to be dramatic with these things, but I do think I have a deep connection with what I'm about to say based off my experiences with suicidal ideations. I am very aware of how limited our time here is and how there's no guarantee of tomorrow. There is zero guarantee of tomorrow. So when you start putting your life in that perspective, you start to wonder, do I want to live my life sick and miserable every day? Because that's the trade-off, right? This is really the answer to your question. When it starts out with, oh, well, how do we do the stuff at 7 p.m.? Let's first start with, do you want to live a life where you had some minor conveniences of being able to scroll on your phone for an extra 3 hours? Or do you want to be able to make the most out of your time here, having as much energy as this crazy guy like myself on the podcast has when I used to be chronically fatigued all the time? That's something you have to decide. And no tip in the world, no lab test in the world can decide that for you. You need to decide enough's enough. I'm never going back. I'm not getting sicker. I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm going to enjoy my spouse. I'm going to enjoy my kids. Now, with that said, you can use blue light blockers at night. That can be one of the things that's done a few hours before bed.
That's true.
Yeah, if you need prescription glasses, that's totally fine. They make them in prescription. It's definitely a bit of a change when you first start using the glasses and you're looking out in red. I swear on my life, as someone who's been doing that though for about 6 years now consistently, it's second nature. It's like brushing your teeth. It really is, where you just don't even think about it or notice it anymore. And the opposite starts to happen. You realize, oh my God, you're like staring at your phone and you feel like an old person. You're like, this is so bright. This is killing my eyes. When we were in Vegas and we had to stare at the projector screen for the computer because we were going over like work stuff, it literally hurt my eyes to stare at that computer screen because I have everything filtered all the time. So start with the blue light blockers. And a good little tip too is, again, not that you shouldn't be doing things for a few hours before bed, but 30 minutes of complete darkness before your desired bedtime. Let's say you wanted to go to bed at 10. Give yourself the grace of at 9:30 walking into that room, blacking it out. Make sure you have blackout curtains. I have that in my room and stuff. It's literally pitch black. And just sit there. And I think people get anxious about bedtime, right? Because maybe they are worried about staying up too late, or they're like, I can't fall asleep. So this is kind of a psychological thing too, where you're going in 30 minutes early on purpose to know that you have all the time in the world to fall asleep. But it's amazing how fast the body shifts when you give it a true 30 minutes to take a break. So that's no phone, by the way. That's no computer. That's 30 minutes of just darkness, relax. If you sleep with someone else, right? Cuddle with them, give them a hug, do something like that. But it's amazing how fast my brain can go from rapid fire, like it does a lot of the times, to, hey, you know, I'm ready for bed, just by giving myself that grace with the darkness and getting ready for bed.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. It's very
Excellent.
helpful. Yeah. So, Evan, you were fantastic. Can you just Yeah, give the audience all the information of how to keep up with what you're doing, what FDN's doing. Tell Reed that Lori and I said hi. He was a guest a couple times on our show, so yeah,
Awesome.
we love him. Yeah, and then just how to listen to your podcast and all the good things that you're doing right now, but like maybe the main hub so that we can check you out and keep up with what you're doing.
Sure. Thank you. So for the FDN stuff, it's a mouthful, but it's functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com. I appreciate your allowance to shout out the podcast because I always look at podcasts as the new TV. You don't listen to just one. You don't watch just one TV show. Like go listen to a variety, right? Like don't trade ours for Omar's or vice versa. Like listen to both. So ours is called the Health Detective Podcast, and we focus more on a very wide variety of health issues. So a lot of the people that come on, it can honestly be heavy sometimes. There's people that have been through some serious crap on that show, but we get to hear their journey of what they learned, how they overcame it, and now what they're doing with their life. And it's hopeful for people who have been through those conditions. So that's the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. And then my personal stuff, if you ever wanted to do some labs, please just let me know that you found us through these guys here so I can do something for them nice. But my business is called buckscountylighttherapy.com. And we are an in-person business that does red light therapy and other things, but we also offer lab consultations all around the world. So that's completely online. You never need to see us in person for that. So that's buckscountylighttherapy.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. You've been fantastic.
Yes, you have. Thank you, Evan. Really appreciated it.
All right. Have a great night.
Take care.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of This Podcast Burns Fat. We're so excited to have you as a listener, and we're hoping that you've really enjoyed the content as well. And if you did, please run over to iTunes and provide a rating and or review. It will go a long way in helping us continuously build our listenership up so that we could provide you with excellent content regarding fat loss, weight management, and just an overall healthy lifestyle. Thanks so much. Have a great night.